Be honest, if your own mother told you, "You're not welcome here," after you came with flowers for her, would you ever forgive her? It was Mother's Day, and I was standing outside my mother's house with a bouquet I had chosen. I picked flowers because I believed that day could be different. I expected her to open the door smiling. Instead, the door opened only a few inches. My mother looked at the flowers first. Then she looked at me. "You're not welcome here." The door closed in my face. I stood there holding the bouquet, listening to the lock click. What she didn't know was that I had spent years trying to make our relationship work. I had forgiven things I shouldn't have. I kept coming back, hoping someday she would choose me too. I had no idea that would be the last time I stood outside that door. 4 months later, she would desperately need something from me. But by then, I had changed. And what happened 4 months later made me realize that being rejected by my mother may have been the best thing that ever happened to me. For most of my life, I was the daughter who tried to keep everyone happy. I called my mother just to check on her. I remembered her birthday, every holiday, every little thing she liked. Whenever someone in the family needed help, I showed up. If there was an argument, I was usually the one trying to calm everyone down. I honestly believed family problems could be repaired if someone cared enough to keep trying. But over the years, something between my mother and me slowly changed. She praised my siblings for the smallest things, while everything I did seemed expected. If there was an argument, somehow I was always the one expected to apologize first. When I helped, nobody called it kindness. It was simply what I was supposed to do. And when I needed someone, silence. Still, I couldn't forget the mother she used to be. When I was little, she would hold my hand while we walked through the grocery store. I remember how safe that hand felt. Once, when I was scared about something I can't even remember now, she squeezed my fingers and told me, "No matter what happens, our family stays together." I believed her. Maybe that's why I kept trying long after the relationship had become painful. So when Mother's Day came, I thought, maybe this year will be different. I went to a flower shop and carefully chose a bouquet. I picked out a card, too, and stood there longer than I should have, trying to find words that could somehow say everything I couldn't. I drove to her house believing I was bringing my mother flowers. I didn't realize I was carrying them to the final goodbye. It was Mother's Day afternoon when I walked up to my mother's house with the flowers pressed carefully against my chest. The neighborhood was unusually quiet. I remember hearing birds in the trees and the soft hum of a lawnmower somewhere down the street. As I reached the front door, I noticed the curtains move. Someone was watching me. I rang the bell. A few seconds later, the door opened. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom. I brought these for you." My mother looked at the bouquet. She didn't reach for it. Instead, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't understand. "You shouldn't have come." I felt my smile disappear. "Why?" She paused for a moment. "Because you're not welcome here." I just stood there. For a second, I honestly thought I had heard her wrong. "What did I do?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Mom, please. If I did something, just tell me." But she wouldn't explain. She only repeated that I needed to leave. My throat tightened. I looked down at the flowers in my hands, suddenly embarrassed that I'd spent so much time choosing them. I wanted to cry. I wanted to ask her how she could say those words to her own daughter. But I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply placed the bouquet beside the door. Then I turned around and walked away. With every step toward my car, something inside me became quieter. That was the first time I stopped trying to convince my mother that I deserved to be her daughter. But I still didn't know why she had rejected me. For months later, I finally learned the truth. The first month was the strangest. I stopped calling my mother. She didn't call me either. I kept expecting my phone to ring, even though a part of me knew it wouldn't. Family members noticed the silence, too. A cousin sent me a casual message asking if everything was okay, but nobody asked what had actually happened between my mother and me. So, I stopped explaining. By the second month, I started focusing on myself. I deleted old messages I had reread 100 times. I stopped checking my phone to see whether my mother had contacted me. I stopped wondering what I could say to make her forgive me for something she had never even explained. For the first time, I began asking myself a different question. What if I didn't need to keep chasing her? It hurt, but slowly my confidence started coming back. Then the third month changed everything. One evening, a family member sent me a strange message. It wasn't long. It simply said, "Things are getting bad here. You should probably know." I stared at those words for several minutes. I asked what they meant, but the response was vague. There had been serious trouble inside the family, something nobody wanted to explain over text. And suddenly, I couldn't stop thinking about Mother's Day. What if my mother's rejection hadn't really been about me? What if something had been happening behind that closed door? I didn't have answers. Not yet. Then the fourth month arrived. Not yet. Then the fourth month arrived. One afternoon, my phone rang. I almost ignored the number because I didn't recognize it. When I answered, the voice on the other end was tense. "Your mother needs you." My stomach dropped. My first instinct was to say no. After everything she'd done, why should I go back? Then I heard the reason she needed me. And in that moment, everything changed. The person on the phone finally explained what had happened. My mother hadn't suddenly decided she hated me. Someone in the family had been putting pressure on her for weeks. They told her I was interfering in family matters. They convinced her that I was trying to control decisions that weren't mine to make. And instead of asking me what was true, my mother believed them. That's what hurt the most. She had known me my entire life. She knew I had always been the one trying to keep everyone together. Yet when someone whispered something about me, she chose their version of the story without giving me a chance to speak. But that wasn't even the worst part. The family had been hiding a serious problem. A situation had grown much bigger than anyone expected, and now the same people who had encouraged my mother to push me away were desperate for my help. Suddenly, the Mother's Day rejection made sense. They hadn't wanted me there because they were afraid I would question what was happening. They didn't want me asking questions. They didn't want me seeing the truth. But now they needed something only I could provide. I sat quietly, staring at my phone as everything finally connected. For months, I had wondered what I had done to deserve being shut out. The answer was simple. I hadn't done anything. They had made me the problem because it was easier than admitting the real problem. And that's when I realized something I couldn't ignore. They didn't want me when I came with flowers. They wanted me when they needed something. For the first time, I had the answer I had wanted for months. But knowing the truth didn't make me want to go back. I had three choices. I could go back immediately and help, pretending Mother's Day had never happened. I could ignore them completely and let the family deal with its own problems. Or I could help, but this time on my terms. I chose the third. When I finally spoke to my family, I kept my voice calm. I will listen, but I'm not coming back to be treated the way I was before. There was silence on the other end. My mother sounded emotional. For a moment, she became defensive, saying she had been confused and under pressure. She tried to explain why she had believed what she'd been told. But eventually, her voice changed. "I made a mistake," she said. Those 4 words were something I'd wanted to hear for years. Still, they didn't erase what happened. An apology could open a door, but it couldn't rebuild everything overnight. I told her I was willing to help with the situation, but there would be boundaries. No insults. No blaming. No using me when the family needed something and pushing me away afterward. She agreed. I could hear her crying quietly. Part of me wanted to comfort her like I always had. But another part of me remembered standing outside her door with flowers in my hands. That memory mattered. Because forgiveness didn't mean pretending I hadn't been hurt. And helping her didn't mean giving her permission to hurt me again. For the first time, I wasn't choosing between loving my mother and respecting myself. I was choosing both. My mother had finally opened the door. But this time, I wasn't standing outside asking to be let in. When I finally sat across from my mother, I noticed how different she looked. Not weaker, just tired. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then she looked down at her hands and whispered, "I should never have said those words to you." I felt the familiar ache in my chest, but this time, I didn't rush to make her feel better. "You didn't just close the door that day," I said. "You showed me where I stood in your life." She started crying. She explained how much pressure she'd been under, how she had believed what the family told her, and how afraid she had been that I was trying to interfere. But then she stopped. "I was wrong," she said. No excuses. No blaming someone else. Just 4 words. I had imagined this moment so many times during those 4 months. I thought hearing an apology would instantly make everything better. It didn't. Because forgiveness isn't a magic eraser. I looked at her and said, "I can forgive what happened. But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was." She nodded. For once, she didn't argue. She didn't tell me I was being dramatic. She didn't ask me to forget. She simply accepted what I'd said. And strangely, that was when I felt free. I realized I no longer needed my mother's approval to know that I was worthy of love. I had spent years trying to prove I was a good daughter. That day, I finally understood something. I didn't need to prove it anymore. Over the following weeks, my mother and I slowly started talking again. It wasn't like before. And honestly, I didn't want it to be. This time, our conversations had boundaries. If something was said that hurt me, I spoke up. If someone tried to pull me into an argument that wasn't mine, I stepped away. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of disappointing everyone. My mother started making an effort, too. She called without asking for anything. She checked on me. She listened when I spoke instead of immediately defending herself. It wasn't perfect. Some days were still uncomfortable. Some old habits didn't disappear overnight. There were moments when I wondered if we were really going to make it. But there was one important difference. I no longer accepted disrespect just because someone was family, and the other family members noticed. They realized they couldn't manipulate me with guilt anymore. They couldn't push me away and expect me to come running whenever they needed something. I had changed, not because I stopped loving my family, because I finally started loving myself enough to set limits. Looking back, those 4 months apart didn't destroy my relationship with my mother. They showed us what it had actually become. And sometimes, distance doesn't end a relationship. Sometimes it gives people the space to finally see what needs to change. Sometimes I still think about that Mother's Day. I remember the flowers in my hands. I remember standing outside that door. And I remember hearing my mother say, "You're not welcome here." But the memory doesn't hurt the same way anymore. Because I finally understand what I actually lost that day. I didn't lose my mother. I lost the version of myself who kept begging to be accepted. For years, I thought being a good daughter meant staying quiet, forgiving everything, and constantly proving that I deserved a place in my own family. Now I know better. Before, I was standing outside that door thinking, "Please let me in." Today, I would say something completely different. If you want me in your life, meet me with respect. That doesn't mean I stopped loving my mother. It means I stopped abandoning myself just to keep someone else happy. I'm calmer now, stronger. And I don't measure my worth by whether someone chooses to open a door for me. Sometimes rejection feels like the end of everything, but sometimes it's the moment you finally choose yourself. And for me, that Mother's Day was exactly that moment. Now I want to ask you something honestly. If your mother, or someone you loved, closed the door on you when you came with nothing but love, would you forgive them 4 months later? And more importantly, what would you choose? Would you forgive them completely? Would you forgive them but keep your boundaries? Or would you walk away for good? I think that's the question most of us eventually have to answer in some form. Because loving someone doesn't mean accepting disrespect from them. Forgiveness doesn't mean giving someone unlimited access to hurt you again. And sometimes, distance reveals the truth that being too close never allowed you to see. You don't have to beg someone to value you. You don't have to keep proving that you deserve a place in someone's life. And you don't have to hate someone just because you finally chose yourself. Sometimes a closed door isn't a punishment. Sometimes it's an invitation to build a stronger life on the other side. I still love my mother, but now that love comes with honesty, respect, and boundaries. Sometimes the hardest goodbye isn't the end of a relationship. Sometimes it's the moment you finally stop begging to be loved. Tell me your answer in the comments. Would you forgive her?